to everyone. Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And hi, Zelda.
Hi, Tatiana. You
Hi.
okay?
Good, thank you. Really excited about our LinkedIn Live today. And thanks to everyone who is able to join us and for this Ask Us Anything About Temporary Recruitment. So before we get stuck in, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Tatiana Ostara. I'm a recruitment manager here at Charity People. I've been here for 6 years, and what I look after are temporary and interim roles within HR, finance, and business support. And I'm joined by my lovely colleague Zelda.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zelda. I'm a principal consultant here at Charity People. My focus is fundraising, data, and marcoms. I've been here for 10 years now, which is pretty crazy. And these videos are all pretty new to us, but we will try and do a good job for you all. Well, we've got some questions. We had some really amazing questions come through. So thank you to those that submitted. And just to let you know that we have got the chat box open. If you do want to ask us any questions throughout this, then please put your comments in and we will try and answer them at the end for you.
Wonderful. So we have chosen 6 questions to share with you today. And the reason we've chosen them is because they cover a lot of interesting kind of topics and common type of scenarios, both from kind of organizational stance and also people who are looking for work. So one of the questions someone shared is, if I had an especially urgent or time sensitive job to be filled, how quickly could you find someone? And that's a really interesting one because there's so many different things to consider. How can you get someone for us, to start tomorrow? Because there's several aspects we've got to take into consideration. So, for instance, firstly, we've asked, how soon are you able to interview or onboard somebody? Because if there's people having annual leave and someone isn't available to conduct the onboarding and to do that formal induction for the next 2 weeks, then really that's the timeline we'll work with, and we'll sort of work backwards with that. In some cases, of course, there's a real urgent need and the onboarding can be done really quickly, and it's all really a matter of how quickly we can find those people to put forward for the initial screening. So for instance, if someone has worked through us before, they'll basically be fully compliant, reference right to work checks, which means that they can pretty much start very quickly. We can turn usually a roll around within 2 to 5 working days. However, if it's somebody that's quite new to us, that's been offered the role, that hasn't worked for us before, then we're going to be mindful about the fact that there's going to be right to work checks to do, that there's going to be referencing to do, and that can take some time. So really, I can't really give you an exact question as an answer as to how long that will take, because it all depends on those factors, and we would have a really good conversation about what the situation is, how quickly could we turn it around, and we would propose a timeline that is suitable for that particular situation. So it's like on a case-by-case basis. Zelda, what are your thoughts? Is there anything else that we could add to
Yeah,
this?
I was just going to say that particularly in the last year or so, where it's becoming quite the norm to be working at home and, working remotely for a lot of the temporary roles, we do find that clients sort of reach out and say, we want somebody to start yesterday. And when we actually come to talk to them, the first thing we will ask is, how quickly can you interview them? And then that's where it starts to unfold that actually you can't interview because your diary is too busy until the following week. And then by then, actually, we won't be able to get them set up on IT until the following week. So you are looking at sort of sometimes 2 weeks. So we try and identify at the beginning with you how, what your constraints are and what your availability is and how quickly you can onboard them. Because when it comes to what we can do, it's all pretty quick, as Tatiana said. But yeah, it can be 24 hours, but it could also be up to 5 days, really. The key thing to mention with that is that we do all the right to work checks. The problem is that when we send out references for the temps to their previous employers, naturally, if they're quite busy, they might not come back to us immediately. So we often find that we're needing to sort of chase them up. And that is the only real delay that we would ever have with recruiting temps. So hopefully the temp will do their bit and get in touch with their old line manager and sort of say, come on, I'm starting a new job next week. Can you hurry up and get the reference done for us? So yeah, we'd say if you wanted somebody in really urgently, we could probably turn it around, the next day, or if not, the next week. And usually it is within a week, isn't it?
Yep.
Lovely.
Spot on. Over to you.
Lovely. So another question that we got was from somebody that wrote in to say, in my last temporary job, the job finished early unexpectedly and the consultant didn't seem to care. So I lost faith in working with them again. I'm interested to know what you would do in this situation. So, I think firstly, sorry to hear that you experienced that and that was your situation. We don't really find that happens very often, very rarely. I think in all of our years of recruitment, we've nearly got 20 years between us. I can only really count a handful of times that's happened, which, shows how rare it is. And there's often, there will be certain reasons for that. And without me knowing what that was, it's hard for me to answer. But what I would say is that what we would try and do as consultants to try and avoid any situations like this occurring is really try and work out exactly what the requirements of the role are, and why the roles come about, because often that can be quite telling, whether it's just a temporary fill, or whether the idea is it's going to be going on longer term, maybe permanent eventually, and why. Often we'll ask sort of how many, it's often months that temps will be hired for. So usually in the charity sector, it's typically sort of 3 months that most temporary roles are marketed at. So we would ask, at the beginning, why is it just 3 months? And are you looking to extend that? And find out a little bit more. So again, it will vary on what the role is. It might be a project, for example, a data migration project, and that might then, the circumstance in this situation, if it was a data role, for example, it could be that they were looking to do a data migration, but all of a sudden something changed and they had to change direction. The migration wasn't happening, so therefore the temp was no longer needed because the project ended. So that's where I would say those sorts of things might crop up, and there's not really much that we can do in terms of handling that situation if the role comes to an end and comes to a close unexpectedly, for an internal reason. There's not much we can do about that. But in terms of what we would try and do with our temp is, of course, if we've got anything that we can, put them forward for straight away, we would do that. Anything relevant, that's the thing, it would have to be relevant. So we'd work with you and keep in touch with you, and try and help promote you as well. And I think that really is all we can do. So sorry, it's not the best answer, but it's difficult to answer without knowing the full story. But certainly as consultants, any temps that we are working with, we obviously would much prefer to build that relationship and keep that going longer term and be able to place you several times. And we've got lots of people that we've placed in many roles sort of over the years, and there are a lot of career temps around as well. So we've got those relationships, and they'll go into one job, finish that one, sort of pretty much into another one. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can say on that. Have you got anything, Tat, that you would like to add?
I guess for me, my thought is like, temp, the nature of temp is that the roles are temp. However, the most important thing is the transparency and the communication. So when they mentioned in their question that the consultant didn't seem to care, that's really like a relationship piece, is that the nature of the temps, yeah, fair enough, roles come to an end and it's just the way things are sometimes, but the communication is so important to make sure that the consultant is actually staying in touch with the client and the temporary worker, and there's like complete transparency if something has changed, that they're made aware of, just kind of more on that human level, just having a bit of courtesy and kind of awareness about, like, not, if that would want someone to feel that, we don't care. And like we for instance, for us, Zelda and I, we hugely care about the people we work and that we support with. But no, that's great. Thanks so much, Zelda. So the next question I'd like to share with you was, so if the question is, if we hired a temp through Charity People, what kind of support would you provide once the temp has started with our charity? Which actually links really nicely to what I was just saying, that like communication is absolute key, not just before the interviews and like that initial start process, but it's also very much so important afterwards when someone has started the role, communicating at least once a week, once a fortnight with the person in post, just checking in with them, see how they're getting on, how they're finding the role, how was the onboarding, how did they find the process, because that could also be really valuable information that we could share as feedback to the hiring manager, in fact, with of course, take into consideration any kind of sensitive issues around that. But I think feedback is really, really important and goes both ways, but also speak to the client and check in and see how things are going, how the new person is settling into the role and how they're picking up on things. So that also that relationship can be managed, and we would encourage communication between them. If there's anything that needs to be highlighted, then that needs to be happening. That needs to happen earlier on. And of course, if there's any changes, whether the temporary worker in post maybe has been offered the role somewhere else, so their personal circumstances have changed, we need to then, of course, communicate that. So communication, transparency, honesty, I think that's really the most important thing. And that conversations, they continue. So we really love to manage the relationships. We love to ensure that we engage with the people that we work with and our clients that we support continuously. And then, yeah, just kind of stay in the loop, basically be in the know as to what is going on so that we can foresee any changes, basically. What are your thoughts, Zelda, on that?
Yeah, exactly that. I think another thing to kind of add, which what you touched on a little bit, is about the onboarding and making sure that we're checking in to see how the temp found that onboarding process, because that's integral to their success in the post, and for both sides, for both parties, because if the temp doesn't feel fully integrated and supported from the start, didn't feel that the onboarding was success, then they're not going to be necessarily feeling good in the role, but also it might then have a knock-on effect, and the hiring manager, their line manager, might feel that actually they're not doing a great job or they're not communicating well. So yeah, I think it is sometimes it can be a bit tricky to manage, because we need to make sure that both people, both parties feel confident and comfortable speaking to us, and ensuring that they're having those open lines of communication, because sometimes if it's just sort of an email checking in, somebody might not, they'll just respond and say, yeah, I'm doing good, everything's okay, and the same with the line manager, but getting on the phone and speaking to them opens up that conversation, and then we can then pick up from that the best way to move forward. Again, it's rare that there's ever any issues, but there's probably been a couple of instances I can recall in the last sort of year or so, and especially with people working remotely and having that induction remotely, you're jumping onto a Teams call to have your initial start, and then you're offline for the day until 3:00, and then at 3:00 you're then meeting somebody else in the team. So you've got several hours there that are left open, and if you've not sort of put things into their working day, it might then make them feel, what am I going to do, or that kind. We just need to always try and make sure that we're making sure that we're taking care of both the charity and the team, and the temp. So yeah, I think that hopefully answers it. All right.
Yeah.
And so the next question we had was, again, from more of a candidate's point of view. I have a few gaps in my CV over the past 3 years, including a year of maternity leave. I feel like hiring managers are put off by this as I'm not getting any interviews. Should I leave out the gaps? So I would say no. Don't leave any gaps out on your CV. I know that historically quite a few people would do that, but we really encourage that you don't do that. It just leaves questions open, questions, assumptions to be made, really. And whoever's reading that CV, they can then make their own assumptions, which obviously we don't want, because it's your CV. You want to be able to explain exactly what's your work history is, and get your own sort of personality over as well as best you can. So I'd say always be open and transparent on your CV. Again, it's all around the being open and transparent and honest. It really does pay in recruitment to make sure that you're being your true self. So I'd say make sure that all the dates are covered, months and years. I know that obviously there'll be people that have got CV history going back sort of 15, 20 years, in which case you might not want to put that on that far back. But the sort of the last 5-10 years are really crucial to make sure that all of that is covered. And if there is gaps such as maternity leave, then they're really good reasons. And you can put really positive spins on that as well. There's lots of reasons. We've seen it all and we hear it all. It could be maternity, paternity, raising children, caring responsibilities in general, illness, volunteering, living abroad, lots of different reasons. And all of those will give people life experience anyway, that you could probably take to a new job. And you can certainly talk about it in interview as well. One thing to note is that whatever you have got on the CV there, even though you can't necessarily go into too much detail, it might be that when you get to write a cover letter, or certainly an interview, you can go into detail more about the gaps in your CV, and which opens up a conversation, which again is something these days we really want to encourage with interviews, for it to be more conversational, and for people to really be able to open up and converse about people's lived experiences. So yeah, I would say make sure that you've got everything on there. And it's not uncommon now. We see many CVs each week that will just quite rightly state, I was off due to illness, or and I'm recovered now. And it's always good to put, if say for example caring responsibilities, caring for an elderly relative, if you no longer need to, if that person's got care in place, you can put caring for an elderly relative between these dates, and now they have full-time carer, something like that. Then that sort of again closes down the opportunity for somebody to make an assumption in their head that actually you might still be doing that, and that might impact your work. Again, we wouldn't want to encourage any thinking like that, but we live in the real world, and we know that everybody that reads CVs will, we've all got our own brains, and we'll see things and interpret things differently. But I think we're in 2024. There's an expectation. There shouldn't be any suspicion. There shouldn't be any surprise around any gaps in a CV. And I think that it's really good to be able to showcase what you've learned and put a positive spin on it. Like I say, just to sort of, I don't know, say that you've got lived experience after caring. We'll use that as an example, because I lost track of thought there of what I was wanting to say. But that might really help you in terms of personal attributes, but also the charity that you're going into. It might have forced you to want to go into a charity that is about looking after people. So my answer to that question is no, don't leave the gaps out. Tat, have you got anything to add?
I just think like life situations happen and we
Exactly.
can't we can't stop them from happening. And it's worth mentioning that over the years I've met numerous people who have had various different gaps in CVs, and they do struggle sometimes to get back into the job market. Apologies, the light keeps going off in this room. So they do struggle because there's almost like maybe like some unconscious bias from potential hiring managers. And what has been proven really successful is for them to actually get back into the job market through interim and temporary roles, which
Yeah.
have then afterwards led to longer term recruitment, sorry, longer term roles. So temporary and interim roles are really, really great if you are looking to get back into the jobs market and it's get to get that experience. Sometimes it's not usually at the same level. Perhaps maybe there's unfortunately sometimes need to take a step down. However, don't let that don't let it to sort of hold you back. So that can be tricky, but be open to temporary positions, especially when you're making that transition back into the job market after a long period. And it's something we can definitely discuss and provide advice on a case by case basis. So do reach
Yeah,
out to us if
that's
you
what
have
I was
anything around
wanting
that.
to add actually, is that we, more and more we're having those conversations weekly with different candidates. And I think a lot of it is a lot of it is especially using this example with maternity, once you've had a child and then, you've got school pickup and drop off and that kind of thing, nursery, etc. You want to manage your working day around that, which, in the charity sector, it's been lovely to see over the last few years how the world of work has changed and how the charity sector has changed, and really welcomed those changes and encourages, flexible working. And it's just been pretty incredible, really, to see from what it was pre-COVID. So yeah, I think that the advice would be just ask the questions. And especially if you're working with consultants, we're here to have those conversations. We're here to champion you and iron out those things. So whether it's directly with yourself, but also then the line manager, moving forward, we're regularly having those sorts of conversations and making sure that it works for both parties. And that's probably, for me anyway, I really enjoy that aspect of the role now. Just making sure that everybody's happy, and when you get a flexible working situation, and everybody's happy. So that's the main thing. So yeah, next question. Have you got the next one?
Yeah, we received another really great question. It's so it says, I have a physical disability which restricts me from moving around easily. Should I disclose this before interview? It's a really great question.
Yeah.
Well, in all honesty, it's really your choice what you'd like to disclose and when. As in, really, at that initial application stage, it's rarely the organization will ask you anything about that or ask you to share this. So at that initial application stage, no, you don't need to disclose anything. At an interview stage, to say I have put people forward for a role and they were asked to come in for an interview, here from our end at Charity People, we would ask whether there's anything, whether you require any reasonable adjustments as part of the interview process, whatever those reasonable adjustments look to you and you require. So whether that's interview questions to be shared ahead, of course, if the interview is in person, which to be fair, most of the time it's online, but if it is in person, then we need to make sure that their facilities are suitable. For instance, for people with wheelchairs, that they have a lift in place. So it really, depending on the situation and the scenario, it really is on a case by case basis. Really, those reasonable adjustments are discussed in a lot more depth once there's a job offer on the table, and then that's basically is covered, what those reasonable adjustments look like, and is the company in a position to support with that? Are they, do they have the right facilities and infrastructure to be able to do that? So the answer is no, you don't need to disclose it, initially, but there will come a time when it's really important to have those conversations, of course, just to ensure that they will have the right support in place for you. Is there anything you'd like to add, Zelda, to this? Really good question.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting as well that, again, previously, I think we all kind of felt that we couldn't speak up about certain things, and, that it might put people off wanting to, shortlist you for an interview. But again, like, so much has changed in the charity sector, and the ways of working and how flexible the sector is now. And I think, these conversations are regular, and, and as well, we find that all the charities are on board with any reasonable adjustments and flexible working, and really encouraging all of these things to be in place and to make sure that they're looking after their staff and their well-being, So there's such a change that things like this, I imagine, probably feel, kind of like, oh, should I do this? Should I not? But no, absolutely. I think you do what you want to do, but certainly for us, I think that at interviews, at sending CV stage, it's not necessary. But afterwards, once you're invited for an interview, we would ask you, and then we would go forward and speak to the client about that to make sure that everything was set for you. And I can't recall a case that they haven't been very welcoming to any disability, physical, mental, anything really, learning disabilities. So I think that should wrap that question up. So, and then question, so we're just going to do one more question. I realise time's getting on. So one of the other questions we had was, I have never hired a temp as I worry they would need a lot of hand-holding and training compared to a permanent hire. What do hiring managers do about this? So in my eyes, I as a temporary consultant and having been for many years, I really feel that most temps are the same as permanent hires, really. You've got the same skill set that you're looking for, the same professionalism, the same knowledge that you're seeking from a candidate. So we are finding the same types of candidates. The job specification rarely changes from a permanent hire. It's just on a temporary basis. It's just on a quicker basis that you want that person in, and it might be that it's on a shorter term contract. So that really is the difference for us. So I think on the other side, it's still, some people do think, oh, just temps, because they might, they're just somebody that might be able to just fill in the gaps. But we realise that it's not the case. You want somebody that's going to come in and do a good job, and you're paying for them to come in and do a good job. So I think that the main thing for that, really, with this question, is that you should just really treat the temp as same as you would a permanent hire. And in terms, what I mean by that is in terms of inducting them, onboarding them, and looking after them, making sure that they are fully introduced to your team. You're helping connect them with people in the team, in the wider organisation, as well, that you schedule their inductions, you make sure that you're keeping in touch with them regularly, and set up their IT account, etc. Organise any training that might be useful for them, provide them with the resources that they would need. I think really that kind of answers the question, really. I personally don't feel that they need more hand holding. Temps are used widely in the sector, and a lot of these temps have got some brilliant experience. They've worked in lots of other charities. They're very versatile. They can adapt easily to working in teams. They're quite confident in doing so. They can be offered a job one day and start 2 days later, and it just be a case of turning up, getting on, getting the job done. And they're used to, these typical sort of sequences. So, I don't think that there really is the need to worry that they would need extra hand holding, especially these days. A lot of a lot of the roles that they would be going into, that we're recruiting for, require a lot more skills and knowledge than they ever have. It really is. You've got to be making sure that the right sort of people going into the right sort of role. They've got to be relevant to what the job is, and make sure they're doing a good job. So those people will have, they would have done the job before, no doubt. So I think that really answers. That's kind of all I can say on that, Tat. What about you?
No, that's spot on. That's perfect. We've actually had a couple of questions in the chat, so thank you so much for sharing that. And I know we're mindful of time, so we'll run through them. There's one of them says, what key insights or tips can you share about the temporary recruitment process, especially regarding attracting and retaining quality candidates? Well, in all honesty, with the temporary recruitment, the most important thing is just being really mindful of that process. So taking into consideration, making sure that we're giving enough time to people to prepare for the interview, and the induction and the onboarding makes a real difference. If somebody is really welcomed from the start and makes really great impressions and made from the start, to make the person feel like a part of a team, that makes a real difference on how they feel within the organization and within the team doing that particular piece of work. Apologies for the lights again. I gotta. So that's really what I'd say. Yeah. So retaining quality candidates is communication, transparency, ensuring that they feel as part of a team. That's really the most important thing to that kind of morale, their efficiency, and their contributions to the role. If you otherwise got one more question down there, Zelda, if you can see it.
So sorry, I'm struggling to see them a little bit. What trends are you seeing in the temporary recruitment landscape? And how might they impact future hiring strategies? What trends are you seeing in the temporary recruitment landscape, and how might they impact hiring? So trends, really, I would say. Tat, I might need your help on this one.
I think there's naturally peaks and troughs throughout the year, for sure. We definitely see those ebbs and flows of when there is more requirement for temps, and those, like summer tends to be quite a quiet time, and September starts to pick up a little bit. Well, we're seeing that now that there is more uncertainty in general, perhaps there's recruitment freezes, there's those permanent jobs are not being advertised. We're definitely seeing, and the thing is that the job is always there, the workload is there, and somehow that has to be diluted across the various wider teams. So taking on a temp definitely supports the organization in terms of making sure things are ticking along nicely and people are not overworked, because of course they're not taking on new members of staff or permanent members of staff. So we definitely see there is more of a demand for temporary roles in general, because it's a huge support to organization without a huge financial strain. So we definitely see that it's the demand is there. Summer was fairly quiet, and we're really seeing things have picked up a little bit more within the charity sector for interim recruitment.
Lovely. Okay, thanks, Tat. So I think that draws us to a close, really. If you have got any other questions, then feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn directly, and we can arrange a time. We can either answer those via message or arrange a time to speak with you. We'll be happy to have a chat. So I think that draws us to a close. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and I hope that you found some of it useful, and I hope that somebody else asking the questions has been listening to the answers and feel better for it. So thanks very much. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.